One of the things that I'm trying to help the African American church with is their idea of what it means to be multi-generational. So many churches are using this term of being a multi-generational church, but they are only a multi-generational church in language. They're a multi-generational church in language, in terminology. They like to use the phrase, they like to tout the phrase, they like to talk about what it means to be that, but they aren't multi-generational anywhere else within their church. They're mono-generational because one generation holds the power of the operations, decides the liturgy of the church services, decides what the worship looks like, and they just try to fit the other generation in, but the other generations don't have any ownership. They are only following. One of the areas where we saw this same mistake happen was in the white evangelical church, when the white evangelical church was touting itself to be multicultural. And in fact, if you did some digging, if you just scratched underneath the surface, you would see that they weren't multicultural at all. What they were was monocultural, and they had multiple ethnicities that attended that church, but they concentrated, once again, the power, the orders of worship, the operations, the mission, the programming, everything else was centered around a monocultural experience. And we're having the same thing in the Black church when it comes to generations. We're talking a lot about being multi-generational, but we're really not multi-generational. And I want to show you why we're not multi-generational by looking through the stages of life of the believers that may be in this church, what you see on the board, and the stages of life of the church itself. Now, where I want to work from is I could work from an older church back down into the younger generations, but I believe that a bigger problem is actually younger churches that started and are actually coming into the point in their ministry where they have two different generations in attendance. They're close generations, but they're different. And this brings up this point right here, that I think the most lacking area of ministry in the Black church right now is in between ages 30 to 50. The area of most lack in the African American church right now is in between the ages of 30 and 50. This is where we experience the most lack of, whether it be discipleship, whether it be actual church attendance. We experience the most lack here. I've seen it. I'm willing to put my money on it. These are the people who are not discipled in the way that others are being discipled. And let me replace that H. They read my L as an H. That's where I think we see the most lack, in the ages of 30 to 50. And that's actually going to be this age group down here, our second age group down here. It's going to be this age group right here. That's where we see the most slack. Now, what has happened with our churches is that when this church started, it started from a young pastor, my guy right here. He was a young pastor, and this is why people love this young pastor, because this young pastor was on fire for the Lord. He on fire for God. We love that pastor. He's on fire for God, right? This pastor is, he understands cultural relevance. He's on fire for God. He understands cultural relevance. Yes, he does. He gets it. He understands all that. That pastor understands all that. He understands it. He is, there's some things about him that is that they love outside of him being on fire for God, him understanding cultural relevance. One more I have to put up here, that this pastor is biblical. He's biblical. Well, because what we want to realize is that the problem that we're having is not coming from bad church models, but it's just coming from churches that have grown, that have good discipleship, and they've just gotten older. So he's a biblical pastor. Another thing that they may love about him is his aesthetic, right? He know how to throw on J's and stuff just like them. They love his aesthetic. They love that they see some of themselves in him. And the places that were the churches that they came from were probably older churches where that aesthetic was kind of maybe frowned upon or it wasn't accepted as much, but they can come to this pastor with this aesthetic. He's biblical. He's on fire for God. He understands cultural relevance. Here's another thing he understands. He understands their place in the culture. Yes, he does. He understands their place in culture. Right? He does. That pastor understands their place in culture. They love being underneath him because he believes that they actually can accomplish amazing things and that God is going to use them. He's not making them necessarily wait to be used. He's giving them skills and training and all of that good stuff. So that's happening there. But that pastor only understands them in their just becoming or young adult phase. He just understands them right here in this place right here. Let me change my color for us really quick. He only understands them as young adults. That's his thing. He understands them as young adults. Young adult is what I call anywhere between like 18, 19 to 25. It can be an age thing. It can be once you start getting married and once you start having children, this young adult is in between that. So 18 to 25, or you end up going into a more mature life stage, right? That's when you come out of that young adult area, when you're 18 to 25 or a more mature life stage. So he understands them right there, 18 to 25, he understands. But then stuff starts to happen. Stuff starts to happen in their life, good, challenging, different, whatever you want to call this. And these 18 to 25-year-olds then begin to graduate out of this young adult demographic, and they just become plain old adults. Where that green arrow is, they go into this stage of marriage and young family, and they become adults. And when they become adults, they go through an important transition with their pastor. Their relationship as adults becomes different with their pastor. What becomes so different with their relationship with their pastor? Well, one of the things that becomes very different with their relationship with their pastors, I'm just going to shrink these a little bit, is that up here in this area when they were young adults, their pastor just did something for them that when they become adults, they begin to start to do themselves. What is that thing that the pastor did for them that they now start to do themselves as adults? Here it is. The pastor would basically think for them. He would think for them. Because the stage that he met them at in life, they were coming out of no youth ministry, and they were going into, we have to be very honest with this, in the way that we do this, they were going out of youth ministry into young adult ministry, which is pretty much glorified youth ministry. And so this pastor was the person that would think for them. What do I mean by think for them? He would be the one that when things would go on in the world, He would say, this is how you have to look at the Bible. This is all good. Remember, this is a good church model. This is what the Bible says. This is how you need to think. This is how you need to approach that. This is what God is calling you to do. It was a lot of this is. It was a lot of this is and thus saith the Lord. Because a big part of what we believe about this demographic of young adults, a big part of what we believe our goal is for them is to help them mature. We believe our goal is to help this young adult group mature. So if we're helping them mature, then we know that they don't have it all yet. And what we're doing is we're pointing them to the places that they are getting their maturation and their growth through one thing, and that is obedience. Look, if you want to do what I'm telling you to do, if you want to do well and you want to go out here and you want to win for Jesus, all you have to do is be obedient to what I am telling you. I'm giving you the principles of life, and all I need you to do is be obedient. That's what's happening there at that stage. This is the reason why so many young adults get caught up in this idea of seeker-friendly churches. Churches that give them milk and not meat. Churches that are cool, they are aesthetically pleasing, they are fun to attend, they have a large part of community, they're going out doing fun stuff, because the premise of their life for most of them at that time is, how do I enjoy my life? How do I learn how to live for Jesus in this world, since I am not a teenager anymore? And what do I need to do in order to glorify God? They just do that. They do that. That's what they end up doing. So he is teaching them maturity and thinking for them. And like I said before, that maturity is coming basically through this idea of obedience. If they obey, it'll be okay. If they obey, it will be okay. They are coming through this stage of obedience. That's what he's doing for them as that young adult. But when they get to this adult stage, they no longer are willing many times to allow this pastor to think for them. And what they're doing at this adult stage is they're trying to figure it out. Now, I told you I was talking about younger churches, but let me talk about older churches and their generational mistakes sometimes. You have young adults here that are leading families. They're married, they have children, they're killing it in the workplace, they're doing all of these things outside of the church, and you won't even give them the responsibility to lead. And a lot of us would say, I know the rebuttal, I've heard the rebuttal from various people, well, just because you can lead outside of the church doesn't mean you can lead in the church. And I want us to think about that for a minute. They are married, they have families, they are providing for their families, they are working towards legacy and goal. God has allowed them to be in the position to be in charge of some of the most important institutions that he has ordained on earth that actually come before the church. Their marriage comes before the church. Their children come before the church. And I'm not saying that all of them are doing marriage and children well. And I'm not saying all of them have to be married or have children for this pointer to hit. What I am saying is they are in the place of their life where they are picking up and learning from heavy responsibility, and they are figuring it out. And what is happening with older churches is older churches, you are the last ones to actually get to them. You're the last ones to give them a sense of responsibility, a sense of being, a sense of belonging. You're the last one to actually put something in their hands. Why, older churches? Because you are not ready to be multi-generational. You are mono-generational, and you want everything else to stay in the hands of the older generation that is in charge. Now, let's get back to the younger generation. See, what's happening with the younger generation, we got to go back to our pastor. Our pastor now has a problem. Pastor got a problem, y'all. He got a problem. Pastor has a problem. The problem that the pastor has is he has not yet pastored an adult generation like this. He hasn't pastored this yet. He's learning. He's learning. And what's hard about that, what he is learning is when they were here in this area as young adults, right, where you see this red ink writing, where they were here as young adults, he was like a big brother and father. Remember, they listened to him. They learned from obedience. When we get down here to adult, he still can be the same thing, but the impact and how he is a big brother or a father changes. It changes big time. What changes about it? Well, since they're figuring it out for themselves, they don't need someone who is going to impress their thoughts and wishes and ideas about life onto them. What they need is someone who is asking questions. They're asking questions. Man, what's happening with you in life? What is God doing? What are you interested in? How is marriage going? What are the good parts of marriage? How do you want somebody to walk alongside you and help you with marriage? How is career going? How are you making it through the world trying to raise children? What are you thinking about school? All of these questions, and then the pastor has an opportunity to begin to cement the answers in Christ. Pastor gets a chance to cement the answers in Christ. He says, listen, I know you're going through all of that. I'm preparing some resources. I'm preparing some tools. We're going through a sermon series on this. I want to ask questions so I can get to know you. That's what the pastor has to do. That's what he has to do. He has to get in the face of those adults. But here's the problem. Getting into the face of these adults present another problem for the pastor. Here's another problem for the pastor. If the pastor's model of church, we're on our second problem, is church growth. I want you to zero in on the pastor so you can see those exclamation points. We're on the second problem. If the pastor's model of church is church growth and not discipleship, then we have a problem. Because ministering to these individuals over here, ministering to them, this adult family, this new family with children and all of that, ministering to them right here is going to cause the church to slow down. They got to slow down because our responsibility is like, yes, we want to grow, but we have families that need to get answers on how they're supposed to live in the kingdom. And if we don't get them answers, we're going to end up leaving them out here stranded on trying to figure it out. But guess what? Slowing down the church and getting them the answers for what they need to do in the kingdom, starting by governing with their relationship with God, with their relationship with their immediate family, and then their calling in the kingdom. I got to slow down. And I have to be a true shepherd. That's one problem. That's two problems. Here's a third problem that I see often. What if this pastor's sweet spot, third problem, is this demographic right here? What if he just likes to be around young adults? What happens if he, number one, doesn't know how to step up to disciple these individuals? Number two, is living under a church growth model that's worried about adding more people. And if it's worried about adding more people and it's not ministering to these over here, these adult families, if they're not ministering to them, then 9 times out of 10, what we are going to add is more of these young adults. That's where our addition is going to be. What happens if that's his sweet spot? Let me show you what happens. What happens here is we end up in this tension right here. Oh, this tension. We end up in that tension right there. This below tension. We end up there. And the reason we end up in that tension is because we now are on the birth of 2 different generations. This A generation used to be just one generation in our church, our young adults. This A generation used to be young adults. They used to be. But now a large part of them have moved out into becoming a part of this B generation, which is just simply adults. Their lifestyles are different. Their responsibilities are different. Their interests are different. Their questions about God are different. How they see themselves in the world are different. And what happens is once this A generation becomes this B generation and we don't have anything for them, they begin to start to emancipate themselves from the church. This is why I call this emancipatory membership. They begin to emancipate themselves from the church. Why? Because the only relationship that they know from their pastor is the relationship when he did a really good job here when they were young adults, but they no longer need that parental type of pastoring and shepherding from him. They need something more. So what happens is A and B end up living in this tension together for a little while, because this adult generation that has now become this B generation, they're the adults now, they don't want to leave church. They want to do what's right for Jesus. They're trying to stick it out. They want to stick it out. They're trying to stick it out, but what happens is sticking it out ends up being harder than them actually taking some independence and leaving out of this tension to try to figure it out themselves. They say, listen, I gotta go figure it out. And people are looking at them at the church and saying, what do you mean you gotta go figure it out? I gotta go figure it out. My family and everybody, we're asking questions about what God is doing in our lives, and the church that we're a part of is not answering those questions for us. In fact, we don't even think that they're a part of their, we're a part of their concentration and their focus. So what do we have to do? It actually seems more productive right here if I go figure it out outside of the church. Why? Because when I try to tell the church that there's a problem what the church makes it seem like is I'm the problem. They make it seem like I'm the problem. How does the church make it seem like I'm the problem? Because the questions that I'm asking about how they do ministry are now becoming offensive to them. Why are we doing the same things that we've already done years ago? Why do we keep talking about the same thing that is really about us being babes in Christ and growing? Why does our discipleship look the same way? Why am I going over this over and over again? And a lot of people see these individuals and engage them, and they feel like they're complainers, but they're not complainers. What they are is growing disciples who are feeling the pain and the pressure of needing to be shepherded, but the shepherd that they are under is not shepherding towards the life that they are going towards. The shepherd is shepherding the life that they came from, and it's no longer valid to them. They're not complainers. They're sheep that God is taking to new terrain, and they don't want to go without a shepherd, but the shepherd is doubting that that is what's happening in their life at the moment. They're going into new terrain. They tried to stick around, but every time they come to church, it's just something that they just don't understand. Well, they understand it. They already understood it months and years ago, and they can't really use it anymore because they've grown past that. And we're looking and looking at them at the complainers, and we're telling them that they're not mature. And what happens is the church is actually too much immature for them. So then what do we do? All of that was descriptive. All of that was descriptive. What do we do now that it's time to be prescriptive? How do we solve this problem? Here we go. We end up building, give me one second. We end up building this side of our church over here. We build this side of our church. So now we have two generations, two congregations living inside of the same church. This, from here on out, is living over here. This right here is living over here. How do we do this? How do we develop two sides of the church? Well, we're going to be biblical people. We're going to honor God and do things well. And how we're going to honor God and do things well is we are going to start with the pastor. We're going to start with the pastor. You know what we're going to say to the pastor? We're going to say, hey, pastor, our church is growing big time. We're going to start with the man. We're going to start with the man of God. Our church is growing big time. But this growth is not a growth in size. This growth is a growth in family. It's a growth in maturity. It's a growth, Pastor. We're growing. And we need you. This is the elder team. This is the ministry team. These are those who are close to the pastor. Pastor, we need you to make a decision on which one of these demographics you feel directly called to. We need you to make that decision, Pastor. Which one of these demographics do you feel directly called to? Which one, Pastor? The reason why we want you to pick which one of these demographics, which way are you going? People who are going to be on this side of the church or people who are going to be on this side of the church? Which ones do you feel directly called to, Pastor? The reason why we need to know which ones you feel directly called to, because those are the places that we want you to directly look after. I want you to go after that demographic. What do you mean you want me to directly look after that demographic? I'm the pastor of the whole church. How can I only look after one demographic? Yeah, pastor, we know you're the pastor of the whole church, and we love you being the pastor of the whole church. But this is one of those situations where we read it in the Bible all the time. We see it in Acts. We see that Moses was told to do this, that you cannot do this work by yourself. And so we need you to pick the one that you believe God is calling you to be invested in. And then after you pick the one that God is calling you to be invested in, we are going to build another wing of the church with some people that God is going to call to get this bill that's going to look after the other ones that you have to indirectly look after. And the pastor says, well, how in the world are we going to do that? This is what we're going to do. Once you make your decision, pastor, we're going to pull all these people together, whatever demographic that you go to. For right now, for illustration's sake, we're going to say, pastor, because this is your sweet spot. You still want to wear your J's and your Jordans and want to use the slang and want to, equip young people to do that. So this is going to be your sweet spot right here. Just the sweet spot. Right? We want to let you stay in your sweet spot with the people over here. And what we're going to tell to our individuals over here, we're going to hold some meetings and we're going to get together. And this is what you're going to say to them. Man, listen, I remember pastoring some of you since you came from your freshman year of college. And I saw you walk in here. Some of you even came out of youth ministry. And I look at you now, and the pastor that I was to you back then, I cannot be that same pastor to you now if I am going to be an effective pastor in your life. You need so much more. And some of this stuff I may not even be aware of. I may not be aware of everything that you need. And so what I want to do is I want to hold this listening session with you. And I want to talk to you about where you are in life. Tell me about the joys that you're having in life that you want to keep going. Tell me about the triumphs that you're feeling. Tell me about the challenges you're having. Tell me about what you need to be the proper representative for the kingdom that God wants you to be. I need you to tell me what's in the core of your being right now. Tell me if your marriage is good or bad. And I know some of you might not want to admit that in public, but what this meeting is for, what this gathering is for, is this gathering is for us to understand that I know that you are growing. I know that you need not only more from me, but something different. And I am committed to building that for you as disciples of Jesus. There's just one caveat. The same place where I met you, I think God is still calling me to meet other young people. And what we need to do is we need to get someone as excited about your stage of life and that wants to give undivided attention to your stage of life. And that is going to look after the pace, the programming, the mission, the discipleship that you need in your stage of life. While God still gives me this privilege to have direct attention to disciple some people where you were 10 years ago. I'm still your pastor, but I know that if I care about you as much as I say that I care about you, I want somebody that is very close and very focused on you. And so who is that person going to be? Let me give you some suggestions on who this person should be. This person should be a marriage and family counselor. Could be, right? Marriage and family. This is the reason why I say marriage and family. Doesn't have to be. It can be, an adult shepherd, marriage and family counselor, somebody. But the reason why I use marriage and family is because I'm not thinking just about marriage and family as the institution. I'm thinking about the stages of life. So whoever this individual is right here, he has to be a person that is engaged and interested in their stage of life. Remember what I said to you earlier. I think the most undiscipled demographic within the Black church is those who are in between the ages of 30 and 50 years old. So we want this person who is going to pour into them in their stage of life, because they've gone from being a young family over here to being a young family still, but they're expanding their family. And this is what they need. They need people around them who are going to pour so they can soar. That's what they need. And so often what we do for this demographic right here is once they get to this stage, oh, Lord, help me. Here we go. Once we get to this stage of their life right here, once we get them there, we automatically stop pouring into them from up top. We stop pouring into them from up top. And all we expect them to do is pour back. I want you to pour back into the young adults. I want you to pour back into younger marrieds. We don't even got them up here. I want you to pour back to the youth. I just want you to pour back. How can I pour back so much and I'm not being poured into? What do you mean? You come here and hear the preaching and everything too. We got Bible study for you too. Yeah, but is it focused on my place in the kingdom and not just my place in the church? And I didn't even have that terminology until I was talking to a good brother of mine, Dante Ben, and he raised this point to me when I was telling him about this idea of emancipatory membership. He told me that one of the flaws of the church right now is that we disciple to salvation in church, but not to the kingdom. Oh, I hope you see it. We disciple to salvation in church, but not to the kingdom. The kingdom, not to the kingdom. We don't disciple to the kingdom. These individuals over here, their concern, everybody's concern should be the kingdom, but theirs really right here should be kingdom. Kingdom. So who is this person that you get for them? I suggest that this person is this couple right here. This couple. They need to be older. They need to be wise. They need to be patient. They need to be loving. They don't need to be surrogate parents or grandparents for everybody. But what they need to be is somebody who is interested in helping these adults figure out the kingdom, not only for them, but for individuals who are coming after them, their children, their nieces, their nephew, the students that they teach as teachers, someone who works them through, who has counseling, not only in Jesus stuff. Because this person got to go out and get people, other people, for this demographic. He got to get people that want to talk about finances. He got to get people that want to talk about godly, Christ-centered entrepreneurship. He has to get people that want to talk about investing. He got to get people that want to talk about working through if you're going to be a mom at home or a mom in the workforce. He has to get people that talk about all of that stuff cemented in answers that come from Christ. So this pastor has to hire wherever his indirect is. This is who this person can't be. This is who this person can't be. This person cannot be. Hear me now. Hear me now. This person cannot be the pastor's minion. He can't be somebody that's come up from under the pastor. We don't want no minions. We don't want no minions. We don't want no pastor's minions. We don't want them. Why don't we want them? Because they think just like the pastor that's only good at discipling these people. If I'm going to take one of the pastor's minion, I might as well stay with the pastor. I actually know him a lot better, and I actually believe he has a lot more experience. And if he's copycatting off of somebody, I can't tell because he's done it well for so long. What I need is a God-called couple that can honor this pastor, serve under this pastor, but actually bring what this pastor doesn't have. They say, oh, yeah, that's my pastor. Yeah, that's my pastor too. Yeah. That's my pastor. And you know what? We're going to honor him. We're going to love him. We're going to do whatever we need to do to support him. But I understand that my pastor has given me a great deed to minister to this group of individuals that God has not called him to give up and stop leading yet, but God has given the freedom to him to indirectly lead them as their shepherd and bring some other people in the mix that not only, care for the pastor, but care for these individuals right here. I got to stop. We got to stop. And we can dive in if there are any questions a little bit more. But this is the first initial step, is actually diagramming and working through all of this. We went through most of the descriptive. We went through some of the prescriptive, and then we'll talk about stages of ministry next time that need to happen in order to engage these demographics well. We need to engage them well. We need to engage the adults who are starting new families, the adults who have been in it for a while, have established families. We need to engage them well. And there's a certain way that we need to do ministry to them. And we need to see what the end goal is for them in order to do that ministry well.